In this video, we are going to check on what are exceptions, how to raise them, and how to define our own custom exception. So make sure you watch the video till the end. So hey coders, this is Biswajit. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. So if you are new to the channel, I make videos about programming and machine learning. So for fresh weekly videos, consider subscribing. So let's get coding. Before moving on to the exception part, I want to say that this is going to be the third video on my debugging playlist. In my first two videos, I have talked about how you can debug a code using print statement, which is the basic debugging statement that you might be using. So here I will talk about how you can raise exceptions. First of all, what are actually exceptions? In Python, exceptions are objects that are raised when any kind of error happens in the program execution. So let's take an example. So if I do print, but let's suppose I forgot to close this, and if I do shift enter, now it is showing this particular error. Okay, and the type of error that is being shown is the syntax error. This is actually an exception that is being thrown, and the name of the exception is syntax error, and this is the message that has been printed out. Likewise, if I just type print, and let's suppose I forgot to put this T over here, and if I do shift and enter, now you can see this is also another type of exception, and the type of exception is name error, and this is the message that has been printed along with it. And also it is showing where the exception actually happened, which is in line number 1. So this is the traceback. So traceback, by the name, it says it's going to trace out all the errors that happened, and it is going to show all the functions or all the points where the error has actually happened. So the particular error or the exception happened at line number 1. So this is the type of error and the type of message that has been printed. So now I will take another example, maybe with open. I am trying to open a file that is not present. Okay, now how I can show you that file is present or not? If you are following my videos, you know what is the command, which is !ls. So there is no file.txt that is present, right? So if I open this in read mode, and if I do shift and enter, you can see it is showing file not found error. So this is the exception that has happened, and the type of exception is file not found error, and this is the message that has been printed. I have showed you 3 different types of exceptions. So there are many different types of exceptions. I'll put the list in the notes. So let's take another example. Let's consider height. So I'll take height of person as maybe 5, right? And what I will do height plus 10, right? What this will do, any height that is in past, like height of the person plus 10. So if I just print it, height plus 10, and if I do shift and enter, it is 15, right? So pretty simple. Height of a person I have defined as 5. The height of a person is 5 plus 10 is 15, right? Pretty simple. Height of a person got stored over here, and I'm just printing the particular value. Let's suppose if I make any kind of a mistake over here, maybe I did -5. And this mistake, let's assume this happened by machine error or human error, any kind of mistake, like it can happen, right? If we are considering this -5 as the height of a person, which is actually invalid because height of a person cannot be negative. If I do shift and enter, you can see this is 5. We're adding 10 to a particular number, still the value is less than 10, right? So there is some issue with the height of a person. So what we can do, we can just put a check, simple if else check, like height of a person, if it is less than 0, then I will just print that this is invalid, right? Pretty simple. Now if I do shift and enter, now you can see this is showing invalid, and still it is printing 5 because definitely we have the print statement over here, so it will print 5. Now this is one way of debugging it, where you can use if and print to debug, and maybe we can do else statement, and we can put this particular instructions inside, and then like if I do shift and enter, so it will just print the invalid part. This is like one way of doing it, but there is another way of doing it, so which is actually pretty good. So if I put back and if I remove the else part, and if I can do shift enter, so I'm back to the previous code that was present. So instead of printing it like this, we can also do raise exception. Now if I do shift and enter, now you can see it is giving us the same traceback that I showed you. Okay, when we were making mistakes, like when we did not write print properly, this was thrown to us by Python programming. I will take this example. Yeah, so you can see this traceback was shown by Python. This was a mistake that we had made. Okay, now here you can see you defined your own exception, and using which you are telling that there is some kind of error that has happened in the code, and this actually spits out like a detailed format of error. So where the error happened, it is pointing at line number 4. So this is the point where the error has happened. Why this has happened, we have to check this particular condition. So here you can put the different type of exception that you want to throw and the message that you want to show. So like you can put any kind of message. Now this message is not compulsory, like you can remove this particular message and like you can just do shift and enter. Now you can see this message is not shown over here, but if you don't show any kind of message, how will the user know? How will you know that what kind of error has occurred? So it's always a good idea to type the message over here. Now exception is like the parent class, right? So if you know our classes and like object oriented, so exception is the parent class. So there are multiple exceptions within this particular exception class. Now we can also raise those exceptions. I have shown few of them. So for example, if I want, I can show file not found error. Okay, even I can do this. I can, if I do shift and enter, you can see it is raising file not found error, right? Now we can also do syntax errors or syntax warning. I will do syntax error. Now if I do shift and enter, okay, now it is showing syntax error, right? So we can also do this. Let's do syntax warning. Let's say what happens to syntax warning if I do this. Okay, now it is giving us a trace back and it is showing at which point the syntax warning has actually happened. So definitely put a message, it will be good, invalid value. Okay, so now you can see syntax warning, invalid value. Now there is one thing that I wanted to explain. So if I go to my previous example, I'll copy this, I'll go up, paste this over here. Instead of all of this, if I just do print, and if I do shift enter, you can see when I was using the normal print statement, what it did, it printed the particular value and then it computed this particular height of a person plus 10 and it printed it out. But if you check over here, let me put this as exception. Now you can see if I put exception over here, you can see at this particular point the exception has happened, but it did not printed this particular value. Previously here the value was printed, but here the value is not printed. So in this case, the program did not crash. It continued because like print statement doesn't crash the program, right? So it's gonna continue normally. But here when you raise an exception, it's gonna crash your particular program. And once it crashes, this particular lines and any lines beneath won't be executed. This is gonna crash your entire program. So it's gonna keep on crashing until you put try except, or it's gonna completely crash your Python program in the end. So this is one way in which you can debug your Python program. So any value that you don't want or any value that you have doubt, you can just like put a condition check and you can just raise an exception based upon that. So let me talk about the try catch part that I was speaking. So now let's say this particular function is like this particular line of statements is inside this particular function. I will do height validation. Okay. And I will pass the height of a person inside this particular function. So height of a person will be passed as a parameter, right? And this will return, or let it print this particular height. Now if I execute this, obviously this function is not called, so this will work just fine. Now I will come over here, height validation, I will pass 7. Now if I do shift and enter, it's gonna print 17 because that is printed it over here. So 7 is passed over here and the condition is checked. So if 7 is lesser than 0, which is false, this is not executed. 7 plus 10 is 17 and that got printed. Pretty simple, right? Now if I just give minus 7 over here and if I try to execute this, now you can see it's showing the trace back. So it's showing exception and the message is invalid input. Now where this particular exception happened? At line number 4. Okay, line number 4 of which function? Line number 4 of height validation function. So using traceback, you can like trace it back. That's the reason they named it as traceback. Now you can also see the calling function over here from where we are actually passing the particular value, which is minus 7. So this is the point where the program broke completely, right? Now there is actually a way to handle this particular scenarios. So for example, if we are passing some value and we have a doubt that this value might break, okay, we can raise the exception and we can handle that exception also. So if I want to handle the particular exception, I will do try. I will catch, and not catch, it's except for Python. Except, and I will pass the type of exception, which is exception. Okay. And I'll just print it that some error happened. Some error happened. Now if I just do shift and enter, now you can see now here we are handling the exception. Okay, this is a different topic, but I just wanted to show that if your program is crashing, you can handle this particular exception using the try except. Also, if I do as ERR and if I just print ERR, if I do shift enter, okay, it's gonna pass this particular invalid input into the particular message and that message will be printed. So there is one more thing that I want to show you is how you can define your own exceptions. Okay, so now if you check carefully, here you can see when we are raising the exception, we are just using this exception keyword and it is able to raise the exception. But I showed you if there is file not found error, okay, and if I do shift enter and shift enter again, file not found error happened. Okay, so as you can see, there is exception which is specifically for our file handling, right? So there is actually a way in which we can define our own exceptions. To define our own exceptions is actually very easy. So I will just do class maybe height not valid, like I will just inherit from the exception object and I will just pass it. Now here instead of file not found error, what I will do, I'll copy this particular predefined, like the custom defined class that I have just now defined. So if I now execute and if I do height validation -7, now you can see height not valid and invalid height is being printed it out. Like we can do something like this, found height value less than 0. Okay, I got height as height of a person. I'll do F strings height of a person. Now if I execute this and execute this, now you can see this looks like an error, right? Height not valid is the type of exception that we are raising, and this is the message. Found height value is less than 0. Got height -7. So don't you think this is a very intuitive way of raising an exception and the particular message statements? And also it shows where the exception has actually happened and the condition when it actually fails. So now you know how to raise your own exception, how to raise your predefined exception, and I am also guessing that in the future, if you get any kind of exception from Python due to any kind of error, you would be able to handle it very easily. That's all for this video. If you found this video helpful, do press that like button. So I will be making more videos on the debugging. So in the next video, I'll talk about loggers. So stay tuned in the channel. I hope you like this video. If you did, do press that like button, and I'm going to see you in that awesome upcoming programming video.